Donald Trump won the election last night. The Republicans control the Senate. They may well control the House. We'll find out probably in the next day or two. The vote is still being counted in a number of places, particularly California. Number one, we need to support each other. We need to reach out to each other. We need to tell, and in particular, those friends or family or neighbors or relatives who are members of basically oppressed minorities, who are trans, who are gay, who are lesbian, who are black, who are Hispanic, who are Asian, or Native American, who are Muslim, or who are, just particularly Muslims, that let them know that we're there, that we support them, that we're here with them, and that we will resist. Number two, we need to start basically being the resistance, speaking out, not being cowed, not being frightened, and be ready to defend this country and the values of this country against this wave of fascism that Trump and Vance have promised will be coming. And number three, we need to support progressive media wherever possible. And again, that's not a pitch for this show. My newsletter, Hartmann Report, it's doing fine. But there are a lot of really good progressive writers out there, progressive publications, progressive programs. If if you're listening on commercial stations, call the advertisers and thank them for supporting those programs. If you're listening on a non-commercial station, support those stations when they do their fundraising drives. If you're reading somebody who you really like, if it's a Substack newsletter, if it's whoever it may be, and you can kick in a little bit by becoming a paid subscriber. Again, no need to do it with ours. We're doing fine, but there are some just great Substack newsletters out there on the progressive side that are doing great work, and many of them have pretty small followings. They're worth searching out and subscribing to. So anyway, support progressive media, and let's help build progressive media. This is the library. This is amazing. A librarian sent me a note in email from an association of libraries saying libraries have never been immune from political and social movements, but we have behaved as if we were somehow a special place apart from these fights. Now, state-by-state efforts to criminalize books and label the profession as offenders are succeeding. The future of our public, academic, and school libraries cannot be taken for granted. Last night's results are not a temporary problem. Without some intervention to combat misinformation around libraries and library workers, not suddenly realize they were wrong about their lack of support for these institutions. And then they go on from there. Over a dozen states have enacted or attempted to enact legislation calling for prosecuting librarians and library workers. It used to be that there was, no more anodyne profession than being a librarian. It's as plain vanilla as you can get. And yet, here we are. What are the things that we expect Donald Trump is going to try to do once he's sworn in on January 20th? Well, freedom of the press will be under threat. He's called for the FCC to shut down television networks that say things he doesn't like. I'm guessing that we will not be immune from that. I don't know what form it's going to take. We'll see, whether he reforms, in quotes, the libel laws or not. That would be the big weapon that could be used. I got an email this morning from a fellow who writes on Substack. He's got a really nice Substack, good progressive Substack newsletter, and he was like, I'm thinking of taking down everything I've written. Should I do that? And I'm like, I'm not doing that. And he replied and said, well, then I won't either, at least not now. But people are already frightened. This is what happens when fascism rises. Fascism is always based in violence, and it spreads through fear. And, it was fear of trans people, basically, that put Trump over the top. These 30,000 ads that just saturated the airwaves across the swing states, and the outreach to the Hispanic community. More than 50% of Hispanic men voted for Trump. This is a huge change from just 2 and 4 years ago. So anyhow, number one, freedom of the press is going to be under threat. Number two, sensible gun safety policies. You know, Joe Biden actually signed progressive gun safety legislation that in all probability will get reversed now. Trump will probably also close the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which Joe Biden started in 2023. It's extremely possible that we will see federal restrictions on abortion. J.D. Vance, a year ago, wrote a letter to Merrick Garland, to the Attorney General, demanding that the Comstock Act be immediately enforced. The Comstock Act would not only outlaw all pornography in the United States, it would also outlaw all abortion in the United States. And it's on the books. This won't require any action by Congress. All it requires is a new Attorney General to say, yep, we're going to enforce the law. And Project 2025, in fact, explicitly says it's time to enforce the Comstock Act. Not in literally those exact words, but, you know, the legalese version of that. Our U.S. cities are at risk of military takeovers. Donald Trump has promised that Democrat-run cities are going to be taken over. Now, we saw this in Michigan back a decade and a half ago when Rick Snyder was the Republican governor of Michigan, and he took Detroit and Flint and I believe, was it Benton Harbor? There were 3 or 4 cities in Michigan where he went in and he basically just said, okay, I'm the governor, I'm going to fire the mayor, and I'm going to put a city manager in charge who's going to privatize your city services. This is how Flint ended up with poisoned water. You know, Rick Snyder is gone, and the good people of Michigan have recovered their senses. But, you know, Donald Trump is promising to do the same thing or something very similar to this. And I'm hopeful the Democratic mayors, I'm confident, actually, the Democratic mayors are having meetings right now about what do we do about this. Then there's the mass deportations. Donald Trump has said that he wants to deport 13 million people in the United States. And the guy that he's going to put in charge of this, Thom Holcomb, I think his name is, or Holman, he has said that he will deport entire families. You know, if people came here illegally 20 years ago and they had children and their children are now teenagers and they were born here, they're U.S. citizens, he said he'll deport them too. If Trump does what he has said he's going to do, I think it's going to be a real shock to the Hispanic community, and it's going to be real interesting to see how this plays out. There was a lot of hyperbole, but you never know. I mean, you know, they thought Hitler was hyperbolic. Turned out not so much. Trump could launch a catastrophic rollback of LGBTQ plus rights. The queer community is clearly in his crosshairs. It was the trans community that Trump used as their whipping boy to win elections all across the country. Most of the ads that were run that attacked Democrats and attacked Kamala Harris did so by attacking her support for trans people. Marriage equality could be threatened. Clarence Thomas has come right out and said it's time to reconsider Obergefell. The climate disaster is going to pick up speed. Donald Trump has said that climate change is a hoax, and he wants to just basically turn our energy policy over to the oil industry and the nuclear industry. He also said that he wants to repeal the Inflation Reduction Act. That's $370 billion aimed at promoting clean energy. No more subsidies for electric cars. No more subsidies for panels on your house. He wants to open up public lands to oil and gas production. He's talking about cracking down on protest movements. If people show up on January 20th to protest, will the Army be there? Probably not on January 20th, because Biden will still be president for half that day. But Mike Johnson himself, when students were on college campuses protesting the slaughter in Gaza, Mike Johnson called for the military to be brought out. And then, of course, just look at the instability that we're going to see in our foreign policy, starting with Ukraine. And will that lead to World War III? Will China now try to take Taiwan? Will Russia begin eating away at NATO countries? I think it's entirely possible. I mean, we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. But we need to get ready for these things. We need to be prepared for these things. We need to be ready to resist these things and to speak out about these things. Because these are the things that they have promised. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, though. I'll be back with your calls right after this. It's 17 minutes past the hour.